3, 2, 1. What's up, guys? Drew here from Punch Magic, and this year's E3 was interesting, to say the least. Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about E3 2017, and I'm just going to give you guys my analysis of everything, kind of go through every conference, talk about the games. Just to get it out of the way, I did not see every single conference. I did not see the Devolver Digital or the PC gaming conferences because they were too early in the morning for me here, and I stayed up to watch the Bethesda conference, but I could not stay up any longer. But yeah, I saw every other conference other than that. I saw them all in their entirety. I actually sat and watched, and I took notes on Twitter and things like that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start with the first conference, or EA.
What up, guys? Thank you for having me, EA. If you guys don't know who I am, my name is Jesse Wellens, and I am a YouTube creator.
Now, when I first finished watching EA's conference, I was thinking that it was kind of a disappointing conference because not a whole lot of new stuff was announced. But as E3 went on, I figured out that not a whole lot of surprises was kind of just a theme of this year's E3. Yeah, the conference wasn't as bad as I thought initially. That doesn't mean there wasn't their fair share of cringe during this conference. I mean, there was long bouts of awkward silence, people forgetting their lines. All in all, this conference felt more like a Ubisoft conference typically is than a EA conference, but I mean, hey, at least they had tons of sports games, right, guys? Ugh. I said this on Twitter a ton while I was watching the conference, but EA just doesn't realize that the audience watching these E3 conferences and actually going to the convention centers are probably not the same audience that play all these sports games. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand that EA has to talk about these games at their conferences. They're huge franchises for them, like FIFA and Madden. They have to talk about them, but they don't need to spend half of their conference talking about these games that not really that much people are excited about. So yeah, they spent about half the conference talking about that, but what about the games that people actually wanted to hear about? Were there any new surprises? Well, the only one that was kind of new but also leaked and officially announced just before their conference was Need for Speed Payback, and it just kind of looks like a super linear Need for Speed game. I don't know if it's open world. I didn't really follow up on it because it didn't look that interesting, to be perfectly honest. EA also showed off gameplay, actual gameplay from Star Wars Battlefront 2, and the game looks good. It looks like it's shaping up really well. I didn't hate Star Wars Battlefront from a couple years ago. I thought it was just not a very good value for $60. It was just not a whole lot there. It was fun to play for a little while, and especially with friends, but then it just kind of faded out of existence after a while. Battlefront 2, however, sounds like it's going to be much more replayable. Each mode is going to have these things called battle points, which accrue as you go through the match. It's kind of like a MOBA system. Instead of having pickups on the map, you're actually going to be able to accrue battle points that will let you spawn as like a certain vehicle, a certain type of enemy, or even a hero. I like this. It does feel a little kill streaky, but it's also points for just assists and doing objectives, so it promotes working as a team, and I think that it's going to work. I think it's going to be fine. I'm probably going to get this game, especially since there's no season pass. Everything's just going to be free after launch, and that's really nice. I like that they're doing that, even if they have small microtransactions for like skins or something like that. And the last thing I want to talk about EA's conference was the one thing that surprised me the most, and the one thing that I'm actually most excited for, probably out of all of E3. It's a game called A Way Out. It's from the same guy who brought us Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. I think that's what it's called. Very good game. I didn't play much of it, but I've heard great things. I mean, it won a ton of Game of Year awards when it first came out. But yeah, this game is like a Prison Break-esque game where you kind of break out of prison with a friend in split-screen co-op. In this game, it has to be played in split-screen co-op. Even if you're playing with somebody over online, you still see their screen on split-screen, and it's really creative. I like how they're using split-screen to kind of tell a story, tell a narrative, and it looks really, really interesting. If you guys haven't seen the trailer, I would highly suggest checking it out. All in all, I didn't like how EA spent about half their conference talking about sports, and I mean, they didn't have many surprises, but I mean, compared to other conferences, that ended up not being that big of a deal because nobody else really had any surprises either. We'll talk about that more though once we talk about the other conferences. But yeah, all in all, I'd give EA's conference for 2017 a big C. It's middle of the road, kind of just meh, nothing really new.
Hey, don't stop.
Alright, so the next conference, which happened on a Sunday, the last one happened on a Saturday, which is weird because E3 didn't even start until Monday, or it's dumb. Anyway, it was Microsoft's conference, and this is the one I was kind of most excited for, to see what they were going to do, because as a lot of people know, Microsoft's really in a weird spot right now where they don't have many exclusives for their console, and it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot on offer for being an Xbox player. So yeah, I was excited to see Xbox really bring their A game, because they needed to this year, especially since they're launching a new console, which, by the way, ended up being announced as the Xbox One X, and I'm not going to make any jokes about how stupid the name is, because it is dumb, but it's also not that surprising. It could have been worse. There were rumored names being like Xbox One WoW, or Xbox WoW, or worse things like that, like Xbox 10, which... oh god, no, please, no. But yeah, the console's gonna be $499 when it launches November 7th, which I think is a fair price. It's not a very competitive price, but Microsoft's focus on this clearly wasn't to compete with PlayStation. It was more to just provide a really hardcore enthusiast console for their players, and for that goal, I think that they succeeded in providing a fair price for what they have on offer here. So yeah, I think I'm going to get an Xbox One X when it launches. I mean, I'm usually the person who gets stuff when they first come out. I'm usually an early adopter, so yeah, I'm pretty excited for that. However, what I'm not excited about is that there aren't that many new games coming out. So they started out talking about Forza 7, which looks beautiful, but I mean, it's Forza. It's not really going to be anything new. I'm only ever really excited about the Horizon games, the Forza Horizon games, because they're the ones who typically have new stuff in them, kind of innovative features. The Forza Motorsport games are kind of just like your typical push the console to its limits to really try to achieve high fidelity graphics as easily as possible in a racing game. It's gonna look amazing, and it's probably gonna be pretty fun, but it's Forza. It's not that big of a deal. However, the next game I'm gonna talk about is one that I'm super excited for, and one that I really didn't even know was on the radar at all. It's Metro Exodus, which is the next Metro game from 4A Games, people who made Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light, which are fantastic games. You can actually get the Redux versions on pretty much anything now, and they look and play great. They're really, really fun games. From the 4K footage we saw, I don't know if that's final footage. It didn't look like final footage. It kind of looked like tech demo footage. Either way, I think that this is going to be a good game, because they haven't really disappointed us yet, so yeah. Looking forward to that. Next, they showed off some more gameplay for Sea of Thieves, and my god, can I just say real quick, the water in this game, like the ocean, looks amazing. They really knocked that out of the park. It looks great. Before the E3, I wasn't really hyped for Sea of Thieves, but I can say now that I'm really excited for it. I don't know if it's going to be like a free-to-play game when it comes out. I'm not quite sure if it's going to be full-priced, but either way, it looks like it's going to be worth it. Looks like it's going to be fun to play. Hopefully you can man your ship with computers or random people online rather than needing friends to kind of have your own ship in the game. I'm interested to see how that's going to work, or if this game's even going to have an offline component whatsoever. But yeah, I'm actually really excited for this game. It looks really fun. Next game, which had Terry Crews in the trailer, which I've actually read now, it's been officially announced he is a character in the game, which is hilarious to me. But Crackdown 3, we finally got to see some really good gameplay for it. And it's kind of whatever. The trailer they showed during the conference was of their single player, so there wasn't nearly as much destruction as they promised before, so people were kind of scratching their heads. They're like, this doesn't look that good. There's not that much destruction going on. What happened? What happened to the Crackdown 3 we were promised? Well, later on after the conference, Microsoft clarified that this was a single player, which, since it doesn't use the cloud-based system of the multiplayer, there's not as much destruction. There's still a little bit, but not as much. But they said that the multiplayer is still going to have that full, bring everything down in the city destruction that we were promised from years ago. So yeah, I'm going to keep my eye on this. I don't know if it's going to be worth it that much. I mean, I really, really liked Crackdown 1, and I wasn't the biggest fan of Crackdown 2 just because it was it felt more like an expansion that kind of got rid of the good things from the first one rather than a good sequel. So I'm interested to see how this is going to turn out. Probably not going to get it on day one. Going to wait for the reviews to come out and see if this game is actually good or not. The next big announcement that a lot of people were actually asking for on the Xbox One subreddit, but not many people actually thought was going to happen, was they announced that original Xbox games are going to be backwards compatible. And you guys probably know that I'm very excited about this, because depending on how big the catalog is, it's going to make my job a lot easier. I mean, I have a ton of original Xbox games, and I review original Xbox games. However, the lead of the backwards compatibility team said that it might not be that easy because because a lot of these games are really old. They have old licenses and things like that. So, and they said that most of the companies are actually out of business, so they can't really do much with these games. So unfortunately, it looks like the catalog isn't going to be as big as the 360 backwards compatibility one, but I don't know. I'm gonna hold out hope that something's gonna happen and they're gonna be able to put maybe most, if not all, of those games backwards compatible at some point. That would be super nice. And the last thing that Microsoft showed at their conference was BioWare's new sci-fi IP, which, interesting that they're going back to sci-fi after all the Mass Effect stuff, but anyway, it's their new IP from the main BioWare studio called Anthem. And this game basically looks like Titanfall mixed with Destiny mixed with the gameplay from Mass Effect Andromeda. But yeah, it looks like they're trying to tackle Destiny's promise of this big, huge open world that's kind of connected and you can do all these things in it. It looks like they're really taking a Destiny approach with this, but they're going to try to do it better, so I'm going to definitely keep this game on my radar. I'm not going to be super hyped for it. If this game can just be a better Destiny, then I'll be happy. If that's all it is, then I'm okay with that. It looks fun, so yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye out for it. In the grand scheme of things, if you look at all E3s ever, this would be on the lower bottom part of the spectrum for how good a conference can be. I mean, it was fine, it was fairly competent, but they didn't really announce anything new, especially since Microsoft needed to announce new things. They needed those hardcore exclusives, not just console launch exclusive or things like that. Like, they have a ton of console launch exclusives, and it's misleading, it's confusing, it's just, it's annoying. So yeah, I understand that Phil Spencer said in an interview after this conference that they've spent the last few years really focusing on getting the hardware to where it needed to be. They were really working on Xbox One X. Pretty much everybody at the company was just working on that and making sure that was going to succeed. So now that the Xbox One X is going to launch this year, hopefully next year at E3 they'll have a lot more to talk about as far as games. They can kind of refocus on games. So yeah, I'm not like disappointed or angry. It's just kind of like a meh kind of thing. So just like EA, I'm going to give Microsoft a big fat C for their conference this year, just because it's very middle of the road. It's not that bad, but it's not that good either.
Using Creation Club is easy. Browse the selection in-game by category, and use credits to download right there.
Alright, so you may think that I've been kind of easy or slack on EA and Microsoft for having kind of conferences, but most of it is because the next conference was... whew, it was a doozy. Seriously, this next conference is one of the worst conferences I've ever seen, and not because it was cringy or not because they had technical difficulties, not because things just fell apart, but mostly because it was just pointless. There was no reason for it to exist. There was no reason for them to have a conference in the first place. Of course, I'm talking about Bethesda's conference, which here where I live took place at midnight, so I stayed up all the way up until midnight hoping for maybe Bethesda's new IP that they're working on, some sort of space game, or maybe like a new Elder Scrolls update or something like that, or something that wasn't just, hey, look at all these old games that we released and announced last year. They spent the first entire half of the conference, 20 minutes, talking about Skyrim, Prey, all these games that they have already released, announced last year, or even earlier than that. They just kept talking about Skyrim, about how it's going to be on the Switch, which is fine, that's a new thing, but they shouldn't talk about Skyrim so much. Now, the last 20 minutes of the conference was like, okay, they're really going to amp it up, they're just going to show new games. And they kind of did that, but they started out in a very weird direction by showing off what is essentially paid mods again.
Using Creation Club is easy. Browse the selection in-game by category, and use credits to download right there. And use credits to download right there. And use credits to download right there.
And use credits to download right there. And use credits to download right there.
Anyway, to talk about the actual games that were announced at Bethesda's conference, we started out with a new Dishonored standalone expansion, which looks interesting. It's kind of weird that they're releasing one so soon after Dishonored 2 and Prey, But I mean, hey, it looks fine. It looks fun. It's kind of like the old expansion for the last Dishonored game, except this time it's going to be an actual standalone thing. You can buy it just by itself. So it's probably going to be longer, hopefully. I don't know if it's going to be full price or not. I'll definitely keep my eye on it because I like the Dishonored games. Next was a game that I think I was at least surprised by because I didn't think the first one did that well, was The Evil Within 2. I don't think this game did that well either financially or critically, but it's nice that Bethesda is backing up the creators and kind of letting them get a second go at it. The trailer looked amazing from like a cinematic standpoint, but we saw very little of actual gameplay from it. There was a little bit of gameplay in there, but not a whole lot. It looked more of the same. So if you like the first one, I think it's like a cult classic at this point. I know a lot of people like the game, but it's maybe like a silent majority. I'm not quite sure. I don't hear much about the first game anymore, but hey, this game looks exciting, so I'll definitely keep my eye on it. And now for the game that I think had the second best trailer of all of E3 was Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus. This game looks really fun. It looks like they kept the same writing style and kind of tone from the last game, where it's serious, but it doesn't take itself too seriously. Like, you care about the characters, but it's still in this wacky, weird, crazy, and horrible universe. It looks really fun. So as long as they kind of tighten the screws on a lot of like stealth mechanics and things like that, made those a little bit better, I'll be happy, and I'm definitely going to pick this one up. And that was it for Bethesda's conference. They didn't show anything else. That's right. Technically three games were announced and showed trailers for, and then it was over. And my jaw was on the floor. This was such a pointless conference. Bethesda, if you came out before E3 and said, you know what, we don't have enough to show this year, instead of doing this big, huge stage presence, we're just going to release some trailers, we're just going to talk to people on the floor at E3, but we're not going to have a big presentation. I would have respected them a lot more if they had done that. Why did they waste so much time and so much of our time on this really small, pointless conference? And that is why I think it's one of the worst conferences I've ever seen. Yes, it wasn't cringy, there wasn't that much bad technically with it, but it was just a pointless conference, and it'll go down in history as like one of the most useless things at E3 ever. No, but seriously, even though they showed Wolfenstein and they showed three games that I'm genuinely interested in, I just can't go back on the fact that they wasted half of the conference talking about old shit that no one cares about anymore. And they're going to keep talking about Skyrim. I swear to God, they're going to run that dead horse into the ground until it's a nice pulverized dust and just floating all around us. So yeah, I'm going to give this conference a big fat F because fuck this conference. So now we move on to the Ubisoft conference, which was probably the most surprising because it's the least Ubisoft conference I've seen in a very long time. It wasn't amazing, but it definitely wasn't bad either. They had a lot of surprises here. Starting with the Mario plus Rabbids, whatever it's called. It's a Mario and Rabbids game, which was leaked a little bit. The cover of the game was leaked a little bit before the conference. Turns out it's actually like an XCOM-esque strategy game where you have an overhead view and you control each individual character, and it's like a tower defense mixed with strategy and things like that. It's basically XCOM with Mario. I'm excited for it. If I had a Switch, I would definitely be picking this game up just to support this new way of thinking, this unique way of thinking. Now, another game that was leaked beforehand, but they officially announced here at E3 was Assassin's Creed Origins, and I have been the kind of person that hasn't really bought into Assassin's Creed for a long time now. The last Assassin's Creed that I actually bought was Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and I really liked that game. It was really good. I just couldn't continue though because the Assassin's Creed gameplay was becoming a little too much for me. It was becoming too samey. This is the same point that Watch Dogs was starting to come out, and all the games like the Watch Dogs, The Crew, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, they all started to just taste the same, if you know what I mean. Like, they were all basically the same thing, just with a different coating over top. This, however, is the first Assassin's Creed game that I'm seriously interested in just because it looks like they're changing it up just enough. Now, I'm holding out. I'm not going to get it at launch just because I'm going to hold out and wait to see how many changes they actually did make, or if it's just another kind of open world mess that Ubisoft games typically end up being. I hope for their sake that it does end up being a kind of unique experience. It does revitalize their open world genre at Ubisoft, but I'm not going to hold my breath. It looks great. It looks fun. I wish I was at E3 and could actually play it on the floor there, but unfortunately I can't, so all I can say for right now is it looks fine, not going to get it at launch, and I recommend you guys wait out for reviews. So now I'm going to talk about 3 games just really quickly, just kind of go through them really fast. The Crew 2, Starlink, and Far Cry 5 were also shown off. So The Crew 2, I'm not the biggest fan of The Crew. I didn't like the driving mechanics. They basically just took the driving from Watch Dogs, which was terrible, and made it its own game. I know you can tinker with the settings and make it a little bit better, but I'm just not a fan. I don't think I'm going to be a fan of this either, even though I like that they're kind of expanding to boats and airplanes and stuff like that. That's cool, but maybe it'll be interesting, but I'm not really that interested, to be perfectly honest. Now, Starlink looks just like Skylanders, but like on a massive scale with like a ton of additions and add-ons for your ship. You can attach them to your controller. It's really cool, but as soon as I finished watching the trailer, I was like, that is going to be expensive. I don't think I'm personally the audience for it, so I'm not that interested. And then they showed some gameplay of Far Cry 5, and I was actually a little disappointed in this because it looks very samey to all the other Far Cry games. I didn't really see much to make it stand out. But yeah, I like the direction that the story and the setting are going, but I don't think the gameplay is going to really back that up and really going to improve the experience over the other Far Cry games. Now, the next game that I'm going to talk about is a game that I think a lot of people wanted, but what we got is not what people were hoping for. So Skull and Bones is from the same people who made the naval combat system from Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which got a lot of people, myself included, really excited. Like, finally we're just getting a dedicated pirate game. Unfortunately, they went the wrong direction with it, and now they're making it into a For Honor / Rainbow Six Siege ultra competitive PvP game with no other content. So this isn't a pirate game. This isn't like Sea of Thieves where you can live as a pirate or you can be a pirate. This is more of a game where you control a ship and you just go against other people with ships. But it's not what I was hoping for. It's not what a lot of people were hoping for. So I'm definitely not going to be getting this. I might try the beta and maybe I'll change my mind. But I'm not really into this whole PvP ultra competitive thing right now. Like, I like Rainbow Six Siege enough, but I was not a fan of For Honor, and I don't think I'm gonna be a fan of this, so yeah, I'm gonna pass. And the last announcement that Ubisoft made, which really caught a lot of people off guard, was Beyond Good and Evil 2. Now, I didn't play Beyond Good and Evil 1. I've tried playing it. I actually have it on my Xbox downloaded right now, but I've never really played it all the way through, but it has a massive cult following behind it. Like, or at least they're very vocal. And they've been waiting like 15 years or something like that for this game. Even though I'm not a personal fan, I really appreciate Ubisoft doing this. But yeah, that was a nice big surprise. Finally, at the E3, we had a big surprise, something that we weren't expecting to see. And so that's why I think I appreciated Ubisoft's conference a little bit more. I also like that they didn't fall back on their own typical style where they try to make it all fun and hip and crazy. I mean, they showed Just Dance a little bit, but it wasn't over the top. It didn't last very long. It didn't overstay its welcome. So Ubisoft had a really good conference this year, which I feel like is a weird parallel universe that we're in. Like, what universe are we in where EA had the cringy, awful, like, awkward conference, and Ubisoft had the okay, you know, industry standard conference? But yeah, since Ubisoft did the bare minimum and actually had some surprises and exciting things to show, I'm gonna go ahead and give them a B. To move on to the next conference, which was just jam-packed full of just games, was Sony's E3 2017 conference, and they started out with a bit of a problem. For people like myself who were watching it, they weren't actually there. present in the theater. We were watching it on Twitch or YouTube or whatever. They had a lot of technical problems, like the audio didn't work, so the entire first trailer for Uncharted, there was just no sound, for me at least, so I didn't really see that. However, the first game I did see is Days Gone, and I was really impressed by this game at last year's conference, and that kind of just continued into this year's conference, where I'm actually really excited for this game, which is kind of weird because zombies have been just pushed into our face so much over these past couple of years, and it's weird for me to be excited for another zombie game. I don't know, it looks linear, it looks like there's some scripted sequences, but I do like the mechanic that they have with zombies. I like the way they're doing zombies in this, where it's kind of like a World War Z movie. Zombies just climbing on top of each other, kind of almost like moving as one big giant mass. And that's a really cool concept, and I like that it's realized here. I don't know if I'll pick it up right as it comes out, but I'll probably check it out if I hear it's good. Alright, the next thing I'm going to talk about something I'm really excited about. Probably the game that I think had the best trailer of all E3 out of everything, even better than the Wolfenstein trailer, which was God of War 2. The gameplay looks really solid. It's definitely not the beat 'em up that the old games were. It's a very different style of gameplay, but it kind of works narratively. I like how they made it so that like Kratos is older, he's slower, but he's still this fierce force, and they just show that through his absolute brute strength. Even if he's slower, he is still just like this incredible godlike presence. And I think that the gameplay will really reinforce that narrative change in the story, where you will feel that Kratos is older, not just to see that he is older. I think it's really smart. All in all, even though it was announced last year and we were expecting to see more of God of War here, I say this is probably the game from the entire conference that I am most excited for. Now, Sony also showed off some PlayStation VR stuff. They showed off Detroit Become Human, and they showed off the Shadow of the Colossus remake. The VR stuff was interesting. I'm glad that Sony is still supporting the PlayStation VR, because I actually have a PlayStation VR. You can see our videos that we made on that, but I'm glad that they're supporting it. Whether the games are good or not, we don't really know. It seemed like they had a lot of platformers, which I think platformers, while they can look good in VR, it's kind of a waste. Like, it's not a very good use of the technology, and just in my opinion, I haven't seen a platformer in VR that has actually like been enhanced by the VR experience. It's just kind of like an addition. Detroit Become Human is a very interesting game. It looks like it could have a lot of branching paths. I like what they're doing with it. But this is from the same studio that made Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, I think that's what it was called. Two games that have not aged very well. They might have had okay to decent reviews when they first came out, but now people have started coming out saying that they're not very good. I haven't played them, obviously, so I don't have the highest hopes that this game will be everything that it's being hyped up to be. I hope so, though, and if it ends up being good, then good for this studio for finally pulling out an actual good game. And finally, the Shadow of the Colossus remake. I'm very excited for this because I never got to play the game on the PlayStation 2 back when it first came out, just because it was out at a time where I only got my games through Blockbuster, and I always saw the case and I was like, I'll pass. It doesn't look that interesting. And then I'd figure out like 5 years later that it's like one of the best games ever made when it comes to like bosses and mechanics and just an open world, and it's just an awesome game. So I'm really excited to be able to try it out finally, and I'll probably pick this game up as soon as it comes out. I mean, that's the thing with remakes like this, when they're remaking really good classic games, like you know it's a safe bet. Now, the last thing that Sony showed was their Spider-Man game, which is being made by Insomniac, or the same guys who did Ratchet and Clank, and yeah, I'm excited for this game. It looks cool. Insomniac is really good at inserting personality into their games. It was a little too QTE heavy, or QuickTime event heavy, but I think, you know, I've read a lot of people saying this, and I tend to agree with them. I think they were doing that just to kind of show off like a big showcase moment. Yeah, it looks like a solid game. I don't know if they should have ended their conference with it, and once again, it's just kind of a bunch of stuff from last year. But yeah, it's that reason that I kind of put Sony's conference on the same level as Microsoft, just a little bit better, so I'm gonna give it a C+.
Where's the fun?
Alright, so the last conference, or video, I guess, announcement feed that we got from E3 from one of the big companies was Nintendo's Nintendo Direct about what the next year is going to look like on Nintendo Switch, and also a little bit of the future. Now, since the rest of E3 had been so so far with not really many surprises, I was really holding out for Nintendo to really surprise us, and well, they didn't really disappoint. There were a couple surprises that came out of their Nintendo Direct, even though we didn't really see much about those surprises. More on them later. But all in all, it's a good time to have a Switch. They actually really justified having the console because they've got the Mario plus Rabbids game coming out, then they've got Mario Odyssey, which looks really fun. It looks like a really good 3D Mario game. Those games never really disappoint. They've got the new Pokken Tournament game coming out, which I've heard those are pretty good. It looks like a fun fighting game. I mean, that's such a smart idea to have a Pokemon fighting game, so hey, more power to them. But yeah, they also just nonchalantly teased 2 games that they're working on. One Pokemon RPG that is like a fully fleshed out RPG, and they just kind of dropped it like it was nothing. Like, oh yeah, by the way, we're working on this RPG for Pokemon. It's kind of the biggest thing ever, whatever, bye. And then immediately after that, they're like, oh yeah, also we're working on Metroid Prime 4. Oh, whoops. Did we drop that announcement there? I'm sorry. Now, unfortunately, for neither of these games, we never saw any gameplay, which is why I'm a little hesitant to be like, oh, this was the best conference ever, because they said that they're coming out, like, way away from now. Like, they didn't even announce dates for them, I don't think. So, yeah, we're probably not going to see any gameplay for them for a while. It's kind of the old school way of doing things at E3, where you announce a game just to like tease it and get people excited even though you don't know when it's going to come out. There was a lot of information packed in Nintendo's short 25-minute conference, and so I think that they were able to pull it off and make it really short and concise, and then they're using the rest of E3 this week to really delve into those games. I mean, they've already shown a lot more gameplay for Mario Odyssey and Super Mario Bros. Odyssey or whatever. So yeah, instead of pumping everything into one single conference and kind of just letting E3 just be like a reinforcing for that, they're using really all of their time at E3 on the show floor to actually showcase these games, which is fine. I think that's a good idea on their part. So yeah, it was a good conference and there was a lot of good surprises, but I do think that the length shouldn't give Nintendo too much of an advantage, so I'm still going to give them a C+, just like Sony.
Wipe off. It's not a battle. There's the fun. It's a test that you pass.
So yeah, that was basically all of the E3 conferences in a nutshell. Now, as of recording this video, E3 is still going on, but I think most of the announcements and like the big stuff is out of the way. So how do I feel about this E3 in general? Well, one thing to keep in mind that this is the first E3 in a very long time that is open to the public. You could actually buy tickets to go to this E3 if you wanted to. And I'd be interested to see if that actually influenced how these companies approached this E3 overall, because maybe they didn't want the public to be able to get their hands on these as of yet unannounced or unfinished games, because they didn't want people, just your regular Joe Schmoes, going onto the forums saying, well, this game was crap, it played like an unfinished mess, when most of the games that usually show up at E3 are unfinished messes that are just proof of concept. From where I'm sitting though, here in North Carolina, just comfortable and on my couch watching the streams, everything online, it was pretty damn disappointing. It was basically just last year's conference, but 2.0. It was just an extension of that, and it really, there were hardly any games that were really announced. The funny thing is, a lot of the games that were new announcements, the games that were just like brand new announcements, most of the time they were really good. Like, I'm really excited for them. Like, A Way Out, I'm really excited for that game, and even though it's like a smaller game, that's probably the one I'm most excited for that was like new. And Anthem looks really good too. As much as I don't want to say it because I love E3 every single year, I always wanted to go, but I can't because I can't afford it or I don't have the credentials to go. This year's E3 was pretty much just kind of a dud. I mean, there were some really interesting games, but they could have been announced on their own. They didn't need this big conference for it. And I mean, I don't know, there weren't any surprises. E3 every year is getting less and less exciting. I'm hoping now that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo have all of their hardware problems sorted out and kind of out of the way, that they're going to go back to really focusing on games and surprising us. The weird thing is, Sony had things that they could have talked about, like The Last of Us 2 or something like that, but they didn't, and I wonder why they're holding back. Are these games further, not as far along as we expected, or are they just holding back for next year? At any rate, if you want me to sum up this year's E3 in one word, it would just be one big fat meh. That's just how it is. Also, I just want to say that we just passed the 1-year anniversary of this channel since the first day, or the first time we uploaded a video on here, way back when we did just like stupid GTA gameplay videos. Now we're doing something completely different. The channel is still changing. We're trying to figure out other stuff we can do other than just reviews. Let us know in the comments what you guys would like to see from us. Let us know if you liked the gameplay or if you want to see other gameplay stuff. Let us know if you want to see more analytical stuff like this. We're probably going to have a podcast soon to kind of celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the channel, but other than that, thank you guys for watching and thank you for supporting the channel as always. See ya!